My bonnet was on the Zoom.
Recording in progress.
Good afternoon. It is now 2 o'clock, and I'd like to call the March 12, 2024 Strategic Planning Ad Hoc Committee meeting to order. Madam Clerk, roll please.
Livingston,
Here.
Mackey,
Here.
Newton. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Ms. Newton did notify me that she is on her way and running a few minutes late, so we'll be seeing her when she arrives. Also would like to thank Councilman Branham for joining us today. Thank you. Next item is approval of minutes from our February 27th, 2024 meeting.
So moved, Madam Chair.
A motion to approve, and I'll second. Discussion. Madam Clerk?
Livingston,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next item is adoption of the agenda.
So moved, Madam Chair.
The motion to approve,
Second.
a second. Is there any discussion? All right. Madam Clerk?
Livingston,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Our first item on the agenda today is our Envisio update. As a reminder, Envisio is part of our, what we have referred to as our dashboard conversation. We've talked about looking at our strategic goals and objectives and the plan we laid out and how to track those through metrics and then be able to create that in a digital interactive platform where the public can see for full transparency. And so we have a member of staff here with us today to give us an update on Envisio.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of council. Thank you for inviting me here to give you a brief update on Envisio. So we are excited to announce we're planning for our public dashboard to launch on April 16th, which coincides with a county council date. So we're excited for that. So far, what we're kind of working on over the next month will be certainly making sure that all of the historical data that's already in the data and analytics section of the dashboard is up to date and current. We will also be working on enhancing any of the narratives and just, of course, making sure that any kinks are worked out before we really go live on that April 16th date. We're also working, of course, with the communications team and IT to make sure that the link will be put on our website, and our communications team will be working on the marketing piece of that, pushing it out through social media and other means. So we're really excited to get that going. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I guess could you talk to us a little bit about, I know previously we'd seen kind of examples of what a dashboard would look like when it goes live, and we talked about how the updates would occur. And so I know in the agenda briefing provided, it says there'll be monthly, quarterly, and annual. Can you tell me, is there a set schedule for every, I guess, goal of when it'll be updated?
Yes, ma'am. So it kind of depends on the metric. So we do have certainly, I would say the majority at this point are annual updates. So they will coincide with our fiscal year end of July 1. Any financial measures would definitely coincide with our audit to make sure that the audited financials are up to date and all of that. So that would be kind of more on an annual basis. But we do certainly have some metrics that are on a monthly basis and on a quarterly basis. From like an HR standpoint, we do have metrics such as like turnover rates and things like that that we will update annually. So it kind of depends on what the measure is, but I do see kind of a long-term goal to kind of start narrowing that down. But the reminders actually will go out to staff members based on the due dates. So the ones that do have monthly updates will be, they will be sent a reminder out. The quarterly updates, they'll get that reminder. And then of course, the majority will be at that annual point. Yes, ma'am.
And then do you know, previously I requested, was there a way for the public to tell it had been updated? So if you look at it today, you come back 6 months from now, can you tell when the update occurred, right? Did the update occur 2 months ago? Like, could you
Right.
see when the update was made?
I am not sure right off the bat. I can definitely look into that for you. I do know that, our goal is for it to be real time. So certainly if it's a quarterly measure, it will have what quarter that corresponds to. So that will be a good tool to track, but I'm not sure that it will give you the exact date, but I can certainly get back to you on that.
That would be good, even like you said, even if it's the quarter aspect, at least so folks know how current the information is that they're
Absolutely.
looking at.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Ms. Newton, did you have any questions?
No.
You did mention that our communications team will be doing marketing and different things. Can also just make sure there's a schedule to alert council members ahead of the live date so they're aware too that it'll be coming.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next item is 4B, website update. Director Welch. Did we lose him?
Miss Maggie?
Yes.
Hi, this is Jennifer Ladishkin. If I could be recognized,
Yes, you recognize Ms. Lajiskin.
just would like to confirm that the website RFP was issued. It's currently open and is scheduled for a close date of April 4th at 3 p.m.
I'm sorry, could you say it again? April what?
April 4th,
4th. Got it.
4th at 3 p.m.
Okay.
And then we expect to have the evaluations completed within 2 weeks of the closing date. provided we don't have to extend that for any reason. And we would make recommendation, hopefully on the May committee cycle.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
Any questions on website update? This is one of our strategic initiatives in the plan to update our website, and we now have an open RFP for it.
Madam Chair, I might have seen it somewhere, but.
Recognize
can't
Ms.
remember-
Livingston.
Can't remember now, and that is, who makes up that evaluation team?
You recognize Ms. Logiskin.
Thank you. Excuse me. The committee is made up of typically county employees, although we do have some outside participants at times. We make those recommendations to the county administrator, who has the final authority on establishing a committee. And we do keep the committee members' names confidential. So I'll be happy to reach out to you and let you know the individual names if you'd like to know specifically who's on this team.
I don't need to know the names. I just want to know the kind of areas that was covered, that's all. So I appreciate it later. That's good.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilwoman Teratio, for joining us today.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
can I just express my absolute delight that this website is moving forward?
I am right there with you. I'm excited too. All right, any other questions or comments related to the website update? Next item is 4C, our public-private partnership. As a reminder, this is a continuation of our last strategic planning ad hoc committee meeting where we had Mr. Ray Jones give us an overview or a menu of sorts, and the committee requested that in a written form to review and discuss more as we narrow in on priorities that we would like to see for the development of a public-private partnership for the county. Mr. Jones, you're recognized.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and other folks present, other council members and staff. So to follow up on our conversation last time, let me just sort of set the thought, set the thinking that we have spent a lot of time as a group, both with committees and with full council, talking about what I'll call very granular elements of the P3. And after some conversations I know that the council had at its retreat in Spartanburg about the capabilities of a P3, the direction we got, which was welcome, which was let's step back a little bit and let's talk about the kinds of things that a P3 might be able to do for the county, and focus first on its functionality rather than all the details of its composition. And so that's what we've done over these last several weeks. And to follow up from the meeting last time, we came with some ideas that were the result of research of other economic development organizations that have a similar, I'll say, makeup and formation, some of which are right here in South Carolina and others are outside the state. As you all probably know, the P3 structure is one that has become quite popular all over the country, in particular in the Southeast, which is a hotbed for economic recruitment. And so what we did is we took all of that research and we sort of distilled it into what we call a menu. And so the menu concept is something that we introduced last time, just to give you a sense of what's happening, what kinds of things are P3 organizations doing. And to continue the menu theme, we viewed that P3 organizations often provide similar type functions, which we call sort of staple menu items. And then some of them also have what we call specialty menu items. And those would be things that are designed really to address a need in a particular community. And I think the hope, Madam Chair, and other members present, is that we would start to think about what the specialty items for the P3 in Richland County might look like. Before we get to those specialty items, if I may, I think all of you have the 3-pager, which is just, again, a summary of the menu, if you will. Let me just, if I could, just run through what we see present in lots of P3s, just to remind you what they're doing. And then maybe if we could, in whatever time we have remaining, Madam Chair, spend some time talking about the things we'd like to see as specialty items for the Richland P3. But staple items are items that we see that are often extremely commonplace with other P3s, and they really should come as no surprise, since the main goal of the P3, of course, is economic development. So under the staple menu items, we'll start with prospect recruitment. This, of course, is something that is handled not only by our current economic development group, but also done in partnership and sort of acting as a team, if you will, with the state level economic development efforts, regional level economic development efforts as well. So prospect recruitment is something that is being addressed now and could be addressed through a P3. Workforce development, that if there's any bigger buzzword in economic development right now, I'm not sure what it is. Workforce development, the idea is that you have the right skilled workforce to come in and take the jobs that are being recruited. If you listen to our state level leaders, our regional level leaders, there's a tremendous amount of conversation going on about workforce development. This county has had a lot of conversations about workforce development and partnering with other organizations, whether they be K-12 schools or technical schools, to ensure that we have the workforce that the industry and business coming to Richland County needs. The other item that we see P3s heavily involved in as a staple menu item is outreach. Of course, the folks that have already made a decision to locate in Richland County and are doing business here, we want to hear their voices. And so we talked last time about ways that P3 organizations have gone out to make sure they're hearing those voices, whether they be events, whether they be surveys. And so those items we think are also important. The existing industry efforts of P3s are often highlighted because, of course, if you have existing industries that are champions of your community, they turn out to be excellent recruiters for your community. Next, and this is something we've talked about here, and this council is already aware of what it's like to target a certain industry sector or to think ahead about a certain industry. Of course, council had the vision 5 years ago to buy all the property that Scout Motors is now occupying in Blythewood. The whole point of that was to have a site that would accommodate a manufacturer like Scout. So the county has often been forward thinking, but the question is, what are the next industry sectors? What's going to happen in the next 5 years, 10 years? And then how do all the various elements like workforce development, affordable housing, education, how does all that get coordinated so that when they're here, they have the kind of experience that we want them to have in Richland County? The other thing on the menu that you see is something called product development. My friends from our economic development office would say that product development might be one of the most important things for us to be doing in Richland County, and that is because we are a victim in some respects of our own success. We don't have as many sites or as many buildings as we once did because they're quickly being filled with good employers. And there's also an expectation that with the advent and the arrival of suppliers for Scout Motors, that the need to have ready sites, sites ready to build on, and or buildings ready to be occupied is even more acute. So that's product development. The role that I see P3s playing in product development is there are times when a P3 has the ability to be more nimble than the county can be. Nimble in the sense of being able to put property under option, nimble in the sense possibly being able to pull together multiple sources of financing, not just the typical ways a county may borrow. And so we see that P3s that are active in product development are often doing so in a more nimble and creative way than counties that are acting solely through a county department are able to accomplish. Final two things I would say that are staples on any economic development menu are marketing and advertising. You all are likely aware that that occurs in a very layered, textured way in our community. It starts with the state and the South Carolina Department of Commerce. It goes then to regional alliances. I think you're aware that Richland County is a member of two different alliances right now, the I-77 Alliance, which, not surprisingly, covers counties that go from Mecklenburg County, the line in North Carolina, down through here in Richland County. And of course, Richland County has been a member for a long, long time of the Central South Carolina Alliance. Both of those organizations, I think, would tell you that their main strength and what they bring to the table for purposes of Richland County is marketing and advertising. What we see P3s doing is raising funds and spending money on more one-to-one marketing. In other words, you see P3s taking delegations to different conferences and trade shows all over the world. You see P3s visiting existing industries who are headquartered in an international location but have locations or have satellite offices in our community. And they're doing that because they're able to raise funds and spend funds and be nimble with travel. And so we see a lot of one-to-one marketing that are being done by P3s. Now, those are what we call staple items. And I can take a breath, Madam Chair, or I can talk about what we think are specialty efforts and things we might want to think about here.
Let's take a breath. I want to give committee members a moment if there's any additional questions or thoughts, comments related to this first section of staple options. Ms. Newton, you're recognized.
Ms. Carrillo, I'm having some connection issues with my electronic agenda. Can you scroll back to the top with, I think it was product development? Yeah. Okay. So, and prospect, there you go. That's great. So, Mr. Jones, I had a senior moment. I'm back. I was going to call you Mr. Poe, but I was like, that's not quite right. You know, Parker Poe, work with me. I'm in the subdivision. Thank you. This may be included here. It may be included in specialty items. I don't feel like I saw it, so you can direct me to the correct place. One of the areas that is of particular interest to me, and a conversation that I know we've had with our Office of Small Business Development, is how can we as a county also be more intentional about recruiting businesses to areas. And so we all, well, maybe not all, we all want, the Scout Motors, we all want the big deals. We absolutely need to continue doing that. And then at the same time, sometimes you have communities who may feel like we have a dearth of X type of business. And I'm not just going to throw out examples, whether it's, it's grocery stores, it's restaurants, it's types of retail. It's really those quality of life businesses where usually, that's not really a role that county economic development would play traditionally or has played traditionally. Do you see some more targeted recruitment as something that is, number one, currently represented on this list, and if not currently represented, two, appropriate to be represented on this list?
Great question. So the beauty of this list is it is only today's menu. If there's something else you'd like to put on it, I think that's perfectly appropriate. In fact, I think that's some of the feedback that we're hopeful for in this process. So that kind of targeted activity, I don't think you'll see it right now in terms of what we see other P3s doing. However, every P3 needs to meet the need of the community. And so if the council decided, look, we need to have some more active recruitment of, let's just call it lifestyle kinds of business that are supportive of having other businesses locate and or just simply supportive of making sure citizens have services, that could very much be a menu item that is unique to Richland. Would make a lot of sense.
And so then is you saying that your way of saying, again, it's not currently represented, but there's not a reason that it wouldn't be able to go on the list?
That's correct.
Then in that case, and I don't know the appropriate way or how we're capturing this, it is something that I would like for us to have for our consideration, acknowledging that we also have an Office of Small Business Opportunity, and that there are different responsibilities. I would love to see us, at a minimum, evaluate it and or do some sort of private program, because there really are, I would call them, quality of life things where, you want to be able to do things within a certain radius, and it makes life better for our constituents when we do that.
And interesting, I'll just, if I could, Ms. Newton, just to add to your thought, that one of the things that happens when a business, whether it be a big business like Scout or something that is a smaller business by whatever definition, but when they look at a community, they look at community factors, and they'll look at very measurable factors like, is there water and sewer there? You know, what's the roadway infrastructure like? But then they start to look at much more workforce lifestyle factors like, how far away would this plant be from a full-service grocery store, a full-service healthcare facility? So those are things that are not insignificant in the way that economic development plays out. So I just want to amplify that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome. Any other thoughts, comments on the initial staple menu items? Anything listed that folks feel strongly about one way or the other? Ms. Newton, you recognize.
Thank you. Acknowledging that this is just a draft list, and just to reiterate something that I believe Councilman Livingston said before, I'm fine with the things on this list. There's certain things that give me a little pause. Sorry to emphasize that so slowly, but workforce development, for example, it's not that workforce development isn't important, but I can draw a Venn diagram right now without thinking hard with 7 different organizations that are all attacking that same problem. And so where we're an organization with limited resources, I guess I would just want us to be really clear about where we're being supportive, where we're being additive, and where we're being redundant, because I do think from an economic development perspective, I think it's actually one of the huge challenges that we have in our area, that we have all those interlocking organizations that are trying to do the same thing, and you're trying to figure out who's on first. So I think workforce development is huge. I absolutely support it, but I guess I would love to see us just be clear that we're not being duplicative and that we're directing the bulk of our efforts where we get the maximum impact.
Any other thoughts? And I do think, as we look at staple menu items, I want the committee to continue to look at this list and begin to think about if there were priorities, if you wanted to start out with 3 or 4 that you really wanted to initially start the P3 with, and then we move on to others, we can. But if there are ones that we do feel like, yes, these are good starting points for us to build upon, I think that is good feedback as well as we begin to shape what it looks like. This is not a, once we do it, it's done forevermore. It is an ever-evolving kind of approach. So we can start out saying, yes, this is where we begin the P3. We want to focus on these 2 or 3 things, and then we can move from there if need be. I do think workforce development, Ms. Newton, I think you're right. There's a lot of organizations that do it. I sometimes wonder, though, are there places or areas that are missed by the current organization that we have that our P3 can help to serve as a voice to say, hey, we are recruiting these businesses and we're noticing that workforce development initiatives are missing in these areas, and kind of helping to make sure the right type of workforce development is going on. There's a huge focus on advanced manufacturing, we know, but I'm sure there's other areas we recruit that maybe some of the current organizations are lacking in, that maybe we can serve an advisory role, help instead of create workforce, kind of giving our thoughts on where they may need to go.
May I?
Yes, Ms. Newton.
I don't think that there's any conflict in what we're saying. Mine was just being really clear on roles and what we're trying to do. And if what falls under that bullet point of workforce development is advisory role, great. If what falls under that bullet point is create workforce development agency, then I have real issues with that. Again, not that anyone suggested it. So I'm just saying I don't think that there's any conflict with what we're saying there. And I guess also to your point, not just as it relates to advanced manufacturing, but when you look at where we are as a state, we have a huge incentive structure and just really economic development infrastructure that is aimed towards manufacturing, and for good reason. What that means, though, is there are certain types of knowledge workers and knowledge jobs that truly get left out in the cold, not just on a county level, but on the state level as well. So if you look, for example, and I'm not an expert on how everything went down, but if you look at, something like when a KPMG came to Columbia, I mean, there's only so much office space you need to be KPMG. There's only so much things you need for something like that, but it doesn't mean that you can't be a huge driver of economic growth. And so it would be great if, in whatever we did, whether it was under, prospect recruitment or I don't know where it would fall on here, but just kind of really looking at what are the gaps overall in terms of the types of industries we're recruiting, but also the types of incentives and opportunities, because I think that we pave a really clear path for certain types of organizations, and others kind of, may have to wander, in the wilderness a little bit to find something that works.
Madam Chair.
Yes, you recognize.
One of the things, just the conversation has shaken a few things loose, things that are coming from the study that I referenced last time that council already has. It's the strategic planning study that really the P3 idea sprang from. That was the recommendation made to the county. One of the things it calls out that I think actually goes to the heart of what you're talking about is bringing a mechanism to truly have a dialogue with the private sector. That's the P, one of the P's in the P3, public-private partnership. And the idea that Richland could be a place that really does a good job of dialoguing with the folks that are here doing business right now, I think would put it on the cutting edge of being able to meet their needs, because they know what they need. They know what's missing. They know the skill gaps that are missing. They're able to identify them early. Some of them are coming from other communities where they have seen it done well, and some have seen it not be done well. So I think it places the P3 not in a position of redundancy so much as it is leadership and trying to guide some of these organizations, because I'm with Ms. Newton. It's not just workforce development where you see sort of this crosshatch of efforts that aren't always, pulling in the right direction. The boat is not going to move unless all the rowers pull the oar at the same time. And as inadvertent as it is, it's difficult to coordinate a lot of just disjointed efforts. So the opportunity to be a listener, to spot needs, and then be a leader, I think is something that could be unique to this P3.
Any other thoughts or comments on the staple menu items? Mr. Jones, you want to go on to the next section?
Yeah, I would characterize, if y'all will still sort of go with the metaphor, specialty menu items is really things that the groups that are undertaking them are undertaking because there's a specific need that's been identified in the community. And so I think this is really the place, if you will, where our P3 can become bespoke and again, unique to Richland. These are examples. By no means are they intended to be limitations. But one of the things I know that was discussed, or I believe was discussed in Spartanburg, was the way that One Spartanburg brings businesses together and brings business and government leaders together in the community. And so you see that in other places, and I sort of see it through a combination of advocacy efforts, right? So for instance, Florence County Progress actually has their own legislative day here every year to ensure that, and they do, my understanding is they do state and federal, right? So they're engaging with both sets of the delegations. You have others who are advocating on issues. So not surprisingly, the Myrtle Beach Regional Economic Development Corporation promotes affordable housing efforts within their region. Why? Because so many of their employers have employees who are driving over 60 to 90 minutes from their houses or where they live to work because there's not sufficient affordable housing in the community. And so on the one hand, you have the Florence Progress sort of matters that are general advocacy. On the other, you have the ability, like the Myrtle Beach folks, to advocate on specific issues that are important to Richland County. The community engagement piece, I won't spend much time here other than to say that you see lots of creative ways for P3s to engage with the business community and other community leaders. The Digital Ambassador Program up in Wake County I thought was interesting because it sort of reflects, I think, more forward thinking. These are people that are being recruited to effectively be folks that post on all of their various social media positive stories about economic outcomes in Wake County. And so it just creates, if you will, a groundswell of support for the efforts. From a transportation standpoint, also one of the biggest issues for workforce folks is not only is there sufficient affordable housing, but do they have a good way to get to work? Not every community is as fortunate as ours to have something like the Comet bus system. Lots of communities have come up with creative ways to get folks to work, and you see the P3s getting involved and putting their hands in the soil. And so that's going on in Spartanburg. It's also going on in Anderson. One of the things, too, that we discussed last time that I think is going to be more and more prevalent is the issue of childcare. As you may recall, Madam Chair and other members of council, this county is in my first to have acknowledged that issue and tried to work with Scout to come up with some solutions. I think there's a long sort of interesting path we could walk down to be more creative on childcare. And so you see P3 organizations trying to get in and coordinate and lead and fill gaps if there are gaps. Finally, the idea of utilizing privately raised money in a P3 to bring people together, to host receptions, to ensure that both those that are investing, but just as importantly, those that have made our community home. We're talking about businesses that have been here 30 years, 20 years, 15 years. The people that made a decision to come here a long time ago, that they continue to be engaged. And so you see lots of P3s with creative ways. They create awards, they create programs, they create reasons to bring those individuals and those companies together with current county and other regional leadership. But it's the P3 that makes that happen. Why do they focus on that? Again, it's because the existing companies can become the most effective advocates for the community when you're talking about recruiting other businesses. It's not unlike if someone came up to you and said, why should I move in this neighborhood? Assuming you like your neighborhood, and I think most of you do, you would be a tremendous advocate for why you would live on that street or why you would live in that part of Columbia or what the opportunities are nearby. You would know. You'd be the most effective advocate. And we want to make sure that we're tapping into that with some of our local businesses. And finally, and I think you all know this, economic development nationally and internationally is an incredibly complex business. There are people whose jobs it is to do nothing more than to help the likes of Scout find the likes of Richland County. And as you all may know, they did utilize a consulting firm that was based in Chicago and Miami and had offices all over the world. But those folks that are in that business, they can also be marketed to. They can also be shown our community. They can also be introduced to our existing industries and have them talk about what our community is like to do business in. And so you see P3s take very targeted efforts to interact with and recruit both consultants and other brokers that bring companies to these kinds of locations. And I'll end here to the point about smaller businesses. Spartanburg talked about this, I know, and I've also talked with them about it. But they host a number of different types of events that are not just targeted at large plant directors and executives, but are targeted towards smaller businesses. They have a Main Street group they bring together. They have some folks that are out in the county that they bring together, and they want to hear from them as well, and they create a forum to make sure that all those voices are heard. Again, maybe not all this happens on day one, Madam Chair, of the P3, but to the extent that this committee decides that's an important priority, then the idea would be you would see it in the P3's work plan. You would see budgetary items tied to it. And then there would be some accountability as to whether or not there's actually been progress on the issues. Let me stop there.
All right, any thoughts related to specialty menu items? And it could be the ones listed, or if you have thoughts on others that are not listed. Ms. Newton.
I was waiting to see if Councilman Livingston has something. He does. I'm happy to wait.
No, I can only say I'm just pleased that most of the things that I was concerned about are listed, so I'm good.
And you recognize?
Yes. So I like the idea of having a specialty menu. I guess my question would be, obviously, we're thinking about things that we have seen and needs that we've observed and that our constituents have told us about. But I guess I wonder, this is not necessarily I'm wondering if there's a source of input that we should also consider as we're putting these things together. So one is certainly best practices in other areas, but I'm going to make stuff up. Is it the Council on Competitiveness annual report on industry growth in South Carolina? I'm making this name up. I don't know if such a thing exists. Or is it the, Ingenuity SC annual competitiveness report? I guess I'm just wondering, while we're putting these lists together from our own minds and from our own feedback with our constituents, if there are also some additional data points that the body should be pointed to review, to say, yeah, I never thought about that, but I didn't realize this particular business statistic about Richland County or South Carolina. Does my question make sense?
It does. You want me to?
Oh, yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Actually, I think one of the best sources of information, at least on this particular area that we've been able to get, has come from our own economic development professionals here in the county. They've done a good job of identifying what they perceive to be gaps and things that could be done. There's a state level economic development organization, as you know, and there's also the Department of Commerce, all of whom we've, if you will, I can't say that we've run down every trail, but we've spent some time with reports that they put out with, just some of the available information. And so what I would say is this menu will never be static. In other words, I don't envision that the menu items on our menu are going to stay the same forever, right? I mean, most of the time, most of the good restaurants you go to, they may have some staples, but normally they're changing the specials, right, based upon what's in season or what's popular. And I would think that our organization is going to have to be similarly dynamic. It's going to have to react to what's happening. I think that will have to be a charge from this council to the P3, that's the expectation.
I definitely agree, Mr. Jones. I think when I think about the P3 for the county, I look at our, staple menu items as, some good basic things that I think we should do. And then when we look at the specialty menu items, as we start, for me, two that are very, very important to me are transportation and childcare. And knowing where we are right now with Scout coming and knowing that we have already been one of the leaders in our state with offering that child care incentive with Scout, it is something that is important and it helped us recruit Scout. So how do we continue that on with other employers here and really push that because it's needed, but then also the transportation piece that sometimes creates barriers to people getting jobs. And to me, those two are very big specialty items that I would want us to start with in the P3. And I think once, you get that P3 to address these issues and set up programs and pilot programs that work, and we feel good about it and we can see the change, then I think we change to something else, right? The menu then is changed. What else is another specialty item that then we can look at and want to address?
And again, not in conflict. And I guess what I'm just asking is, I'm being asked to provide input on this, which I will do. I'm just saying, are there other things that I should look at that would help inform my opinion? So that was the crux of my question.
Other thoughts on specialty menu items? Councilman Branham.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, for putting together this menu. It's very helpful, and I do think that it will benefit us greatly as we try to consider, number one, is a P3 something that Richland County is ready to do right now? And number two, what should it look like in its first iteration? certainly can appreciate the delineation between the staple menu items and the specialty menu items. It makes sense to me as far as how you broke those down. Just as a general comment, I would say, very much in favor of us working to connect people to kind of, I guess, galvanize the private sector in a positive way when it comes to highlighting all the good that's here in our community and then trying to raise the level of the local economy. Always very concerned about potential for expanding, this expending of public funds for a new initiative, all with good intentions, and I'm very much in favor of supporting the recruitment of jobs and also seeing people qualify themselves for the jobs that will allow them to better cover their household needs and also being able to enjoy their lives beyond that. Here in Richland County, I'd be very reluctant to look at committing taxpayer money down to an individual level when it comes to individual households or individuals' transportation or child care needs. And just wanted to share that with you as we continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Branham. I just, for the record, I don't know if there's been any commitment of that, so I want to make sure there was no confusion. Any other comments? So, Mr. Jones, that was the end of your list, correct? So this, now this list has been provided based after our last committee meeting. We have the information in front of us. Where we are at now is the committee needs to begin to prioritize and make recommendations on staple menu items and specialty menu items, of which we would like to start the P3. That then will take us to our next step of being able to then kind of form what that looks like in the next step of the P3 process. So I know this was something that folks requested, and so I'm open tonight if anybody wants to make any type of motion on next steps or how to move forward.
I would move that we forward this to full council, and the items provided, recommend those as staple items, and also send the full list of the specialty ones, but prioritize transportation, child care, and community engagement, because the community engagement, I don't want to move forward without. That would be my motion.
Second, any discussion? Ms. Newton, yes, you are recognized.
What does that mean? And then what would happen after that?
I don't know what happened after that, but what my motion means is we just simply forward to full council for consideration for adoption.
So I would think that this can be shared with the full council for feedback on it. I think we still would need to keep things in committee to continue development of the process before we say the P3 is done. But I think giving this to full council and seeing their feedback on these items and making sure everybody is fully aware of where it is so we're not getting too far down the road in the committee is a good process to get their feedback. But I don't think that's the end of it. I think there's still many more conversations to be on what happens in the
So if that is correct and that what we're doing is saying, hey, council members provide feedback, and that might not be correct, but if that is, then I guess I don't understand why we would need a motion and not just send it to council members and say, hey, council members, please provide feedback by X date. You know, we're continuing to discuss this in committee.
I think the motion helps solidify that we're all on the page as a committee, that we're ready for this to be a thing that gets feedback per se. unless there's more that we want to see, if we want Mr. Jones to give us more, or are we saying, yes, as a committee, we received the information that we want to receive related to menu items, and we want to make sure the full body gives their feedback on it as well?
Heard.
Do not let me speak words into Mr. Livingston's motion. We are in discussion.
I just think it's important for county council to get this information and decide what they want to do with it. Full council.
Sure. Again, we can send information to full council at any point. So I guess I'm just a little confused on this process. But I guess separately then, I heard in your motion that you were prioritizing transportation, childcare, and community engagement. And I think that those are wonderful areas. But again, as I mentioned, for me, in the area that I represent and perhaps others, I really would like to see us evaluate what are our opportunities to look at recruiting and welcoming some of those quality of life businesses into communities that provide the types of services that they feel are missing. You know, again, whether it's on a recreational front or a food and hospitality front or a grocery store front, whatever that is. That's not the same as me saying that we're obligating council to do that or do specific things, but it's something that I hear all the time that I think is hugely important and a part of business and creating the environment where people want to live. So
The motion include that too.
I would support that amendment.
I guess I have a question. Is what you described, do you not consider that already under prospect recruitment, one of the staple items?
Well, when I asked Mr. Jones if he thought it was included, the author didn't think it was, and I didn't think it was.
But what
I'm going
would you
for
call
no.
that? What is if you had to name it and add it, what would you categorize?
Wherever you put it, I would call it recruiting quality. I would call it either recruiting quality of life businesses or evaluating. I would put it under the quality of life. I think Mr. Jones called it lifestyle, but for me, it's really quality of life. But I'm not going to quibble.
Quality of life, and you would have that be a specialty menu item?
It depends. If making it specialty makes it optional and something that we're not going to look at, then no. And it's something that I want us to seriously look at, consider, and evaluate how or if we can do it. So wherever it needs to go so that it has that level of consideration is fine with me. But I find it to be very important.
While we're in discussion, are you able to add?
Taking notes, yes.
We had a motion and second, then there was discussion, and there was amendment to the motion. Any further discussion?
Is there a particular date that we want associated with this feedback, or it doesn't need to be part of the motion, so never mind.
All right.
Livingston,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes?
Motion approved.
Mr. Jones, I know we talked about we are going to get feedback from council related to this. I do not remember off the top of my head on your chart. What was the next part of your chart? You might not remember either. I don't have it in front of me.
Well, I mean, we've got some decisions to make. I mean, so I think we decided to focus here. What's the P3 going to do? And so we're going to get some feedback on that. I think that's good. I think the next area that we should really talk about is how do we want the P3 to be organized, and specifically, how do we want the board to function vis-a-vis the county council, vis-a-vis appointment, et cetera. I think, and we can, again, we can come back and with research and talk about options and all the things.
Okay, so we'll move forward with getting this to the full body for approval and then bringing that back to, well, not for approval, for their feedback. And then we will come back to committee and continue on with the next steps. Any further discussion? All right. At item number 5.
Move for adjournment, Madam Chair.
Second.
Motion and a second. Madam Clerk?
Livingston,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes?
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.